So welcome to Bounce Grand Rounds. We were just talking before we all came together. This is our seventh Grand Rounds. It started as a vision from the Bounce executive team on how can we pull everyone together in a way that we can understand, share common issues, and help each other resolve what those issues are when it comes to children and the experiences that they are having and the adverse childhood experiences. So we welcome you. We've set an agenda today to present a case study, as we always do, and have discussion around that and share our ideas on how to address the particular issue. But to augment that work today, we are going to have a general discussion of what are ACEs and how does Bounce address that, and how do we look at equity and vote that into the work we do? Because we may have some new folks with us, and I think it's good to do that total overview of Bounce and what we're about. And then we're going to go into a presentation on where we are today with youth mental health issues, especially in the state of Kentucky. So to get us started, since we are under a time constraint, I'd like to introduce you to Keith Hickman. Keith Hickman is the Executive Director of Collective Impact at the International Institute for Restorative Practices. This institute is not only providing services domestically in the United States, of course, but globally. And we're really thrilled that Keith, with his connections to Louisville, Kentucky, has agreed to be a part of our executive team. We believe Keith can bring a lot of vision toward Bounce and how we can grow in the future to be more comprehensive in the work that we do and to be more impactful. We hope that each of you feel comfortable with Bounce and the work. And if you have any ideas, put it in the chat or contact us at any time. Your input is important. It's important to us that we understand you and the area and the work that you do as well. Keith, good morning.
Thank you, BJ. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Just give me a second. I'll share my screen and pull up some slides I want to share with you. So again, I'm Keith Hickman. I am a member of the executive committee at Bounce, and it's a pleasure joining you here today for the May Grand Rounds. So I'm going to spend a few minutes doing a quick review of the adverse childhood experiences from the lens of equity and the role that the Kentucky Bounce has played to make Kentucky a healthier state for its youngest citizens. So we are a coalition that's committed to the health and well-being of children and their families and the communities that we care so deeply about across the state of Kentucky. I'm joining you from New York City, but I am a resident, born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. Spent many years there, obviously, and then moved to Seattle and then to New York, and had spent the last 21 years here in New York City with my family. But my heart and my commitment is still with the folks of Kentucky. We are a diverse group of leaders at Bounce that are professionals and parents and family members, and simply just caring adults that want to make a difference in helping our community members bounce back from adversity. And we do this through education and training to help raise awareness and teach critical practices and skills in environments where young people live, learn, and play. We partner with organizations around the state to create healing-centered environments where young people can have solid and healthy relationships critical to their ability to flourish, thrive, and belong. We're very active in helping to shape and guide common sense policies, I believe, with our community residents that advocate for transformative and sustainable change through the resources that are distributed equitably and to interrupt and prevent adverse childhood experiences and trauma, particularly in our under-resourced communities. We know a little something about ACEs because of our commitment to apply data-informed practices. We know that collectively we must reduce the number of young people experiencing at least two of the ACEs because of the lifelong effects of their health and overall well-being. We also know that ACEs can carry over from generation to generation if we don't urgently intervene and prevent using multiple strategies that we are finding impactful. So when we talk about ACEs, we must collectively and across stakeholder groups eliminate as much as we can these 10 destructive behaviors that are impacting our young people from birth to 18 to be unhealthy Kentuckians. I'm going to skip this, BJ. I was going to play a clip by Oprah Winfrey and Bill Perry, but I will say if you get a chance, you can find this on YouTube. It's the life-changing story of Oprah that Oprah reports on with 60 Minutes. It's very, very, I found it to be very, very transparent and very profound. I think her work with Bruce Perry and the book, What Happened to You, is a powerful question and a powerful narrative approach to the ACEs work. And it is through the power of narrative around that simple question that I think we all as caring adults should be exploring with our young people. So I would urge you to find that. It's on YouTube. I'm not going to play it this time because I want to, in the interest of time, I want to move us into our smaller groups. So the biggest question that they raise in that video and what Bruce talks about is what happened to you. And so when we are caring adults and caring professionals, caring neighbors, family members, friends, what we want to explore with young people is the question of what happened to them. And we begin to look at ACEs. When we do that, we begin, I believe, to look at ACEs from a different view. One that begins to look at more than just the 10 ACEs, but go deeper around what are discriminatory practices that they've experienced, how have they been marginalized as particular groups of folks, within their environment that's preventing them from thriving and experiencing well-being. We begin to really look at the environment when we ask what happened to you, and that's not only the school environment, but the multiple milieux that they belong to. And we begin to look at one of possibility over implausibility. So, and to do so, we must change these things. So growing up unhealthy and in despair looks like this. And I know it's a tall task and a tall order for one individual, but when we take a collective impact approach and we collectively begin to strengthen our relationships and build community around eliminating these things, we create the possibility of doing these things, growing up healthy and hopeful and providing environments that are healthy and hopeful for our young people. So I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to kick it over to Joe to talk about one of the more important pieces of our work, which is the training. Joe?
Thank you, Keith. But I'm Joe Bargione. I'm part of the Bounce Coalition. I serve on the Executive Council, and I'm one of their lead trainers. So I'm happy to be here this morning with you folks. And I'm going to share with you some data around the mental health status of our kids in Kentucky. And then also a little bit about the kinds of environments many of our kids in Kentucky are living with. So let's kind of take a look at our youth in Kentucky. The first thing I want to share with you, what I'm excited about this Grand Rounds is that we have people from all over Kentucky who attend this. You can just look in the chat box geographically, which is really nice to see. What I also like about this is we have all the different disciplines that interact with kids. So I know we have educators on the call this morning on our meeting. We have public health officials. We have healthcare providers. I know we have some pediatricians here. We have some behavioral health people. We have advocacy groups, also part of this as school time providers. So what I like about this, it gives us the opportunity as we work collectively, as Keith was talking about, that if we want an impact, we have to work collectively and using some of the same language. And a part of that, we do that is through training. But what you see here, this is a new resource, and I love it, from the Centers for Disease Control. And you can download this, or we can call it, if you don't mind, maybe putting this in the chat box as a link if people want to see this. But this is a great info chart that talks a little bit about adverse childhood experiences. And I know you all are doing something to address that in whatever agency or organization you work with. But just a couple of points. We know at the top part, we have the types of ACEs, we have the abuse, neglect, and household challenges. But the other part I want to draw your attention to, and I know many of us now start to address this, but the other adversities, if you remember in the original study, they talked about those top 10 ACEs events. But we know that there's a number of other adversities that impact kids in a negative way, such as bullying, community violence, natural disasters, wartime experiences of refugees, or witnessing or experiencing acts of terrorism. So there's many more adversities in a child's life that have a negative impact on the child than just the original 10 that was done in the original study in the late 90s, early 2000s. The other important piece I want to draw your attention to, if we can go to the next slide, is we talked about ACEs a lot in our trainings. But what I like about this is now we're going to start talking about positive childhood experiences, right? So often in previous trainings or when you're working with kids and families, you talk about the adverse childhood experiences. But there are things that we can do collectively to help create positive childhood experiences. So I just want to draw your attention to the 6 things at the top. And these are 6 pillars that if we're able to do or put in place for kids, we're going to have better outcomes for kids. So I really do like that. So strengthen the family's financial stability, right? If we're able to address that collectively and as a community and as a state, that's going to have positive impact on a young person. Promote social norms and protect against violence. Help kids get a good start, early learning programs, affordable preschool and childcare programs. Teach healthy relationships. I know regardless of what organization you work with, what you work for right now, I'm sure you're doing a lot of work in that, teaching healthy relationships. And then connecting youth with activities and caring adults. And we know from the literature that the number 1 protective factor for kids is having at least one caring adult in their lives. And then the last thing we can do to address in the area of positive childhood experiences is intervene to lessen the immediate and long-term harmful effects, right? So through ACEs education, therapy, family-centered treatment, and substance abuse treatment, right? So what I encourage you to do in whatever community you live within in and around Kentucky, and you're working with your partners as a collective impact, is be thinking about these positive steps. If we can do any of these 6, it's going to have a positive impact on kids. And so I think we're moving away from just talking about ACEs, but now we're talking about the positive things and taking active roles in creating those positive childhood experiences. And then if we're able to do that, you can see there's a financial implication for us, our country. Okay. So Carly, if you would go to the next slide. And this is some data we got from Kentucky Injury and Prevention and Research Center. And I gathered this on April 27th, a couple of weeks ago. And I know, if you listen in the media, we know a lot of our kids are struggling with mental health and behavioral health issues. So I just want to give you a little bit of a perspective and some trend data that we have around the behavioral health of kids. So on the left-hand side, you see those are the number of youth in our state who died by suicide between 2016 and 2021. We don't have the 22 data yet because obviously we're still in this year. But we've actually remained kind of consistent over those 5 or 6 years, right? So if you go from 2016, we had 25 youth who died by suicide. And in 2021, we had 23. Now, those are very low numbers, but one child dying by suicide is too many. And if you want to break that down a little bit more by gender, you can see it's remained relatively consistent for females and males. But more young people who are identified as male do die more often by suicide than females. On the left-hand side, this is really, I think, where you're going to see some of the increased needs for mental health services and behavioral health services. So on the slide, on the graph on the right, once again, it's trend data from 2016 to 2021. And this is non-fatal intentional self-harm injury-related inpatient hospitalizations among our youth, okay? So when you look at our total number, from 2016, we went from 303 to 2021 to 559. And then when we break it down by race, we see increases across Black, white, and others over those 6 years. And if you want to do by gender, you also see the increase both for males and females. And we also see an increase in the age groups for the young people under the age of 14, and for those who fall into the category 14 through 17. If you would go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about emergency room visits for non-fatal intentional harming behavior that our young people do. And so once again, it's over a 6-year period from 2016 to 2021. And once again, we're seeing the same trends as we did for the hospitalizations, that regardless of what group we're looking at, we've seen increases across all our groups, whether it's race, sex, or age groups, that from 2016 to 2021, we've seen more young people go to the hospitals for emergency department visits for non-injuries, non-intentional self-harm, non-fatal intentional self-harm injuries. Okay, so Carly, if you would go to the next slide. I want to just spend a moment or two about the kinds of environments our kids are living in Kentucky. And this is, if you want more of this information, you can go to Kentucky Youth Advocates. They do a wonderful job in getting the kids count book every year. And so just to give you an idea of how our kids financially are in Kentucky, and the first part of that is children living in poverty. And the data is from 2014 and 2019. If you see a green check, that's good. That shows progress. So when we're looking at the percent of children in Kentucky who are living below 100% of the federal poverty line, we've actually seen an improvement, a reduction of children. Whereas 1 in 4 children, or about 26% of our kids in 2014, lived in poverty, below 100% below the poverty line. Whereas in 2019, when this data was collected, it was at 21%. So they're approximately going from 1 in 4 children to 1 in 5 children. So that's a positive thing we're seeing. When we're thinking in terms of education, we look from the time period of 15-16 to the 2021 school year, and this is high school graduation rates. We went from 88.6% to 90%. So once again, you see the check mark that tells us we're improving our graduation rates. And we know that people who graduate high school have better life outcomes, whether you're looking at it economically, socially. So that's a nice trend that we're also seeing. Okay, let's talk about some of the other data, Carly. Unfortunately, you see an X there for children living in foster care from 2013 to 2015 to the comparative group of 2018-2020. And this is a per 1,000 children under the age of 17, okay? So there was 39, let's just say 39 children in the 2013 to 2015 out of every 1,000 kids were in foster care in Kentucky. Unfortunately, fast forward 5 years later, now it's 53 children in Kentucky living in foster care for the same 1,000, okay? We did see an improvement in the youth incarcerated rates from 2013 to 15 and 2018 to 2020. So once again, this is per 1,000 young people. We went from 31 young people to 22 young people who are in the youth incarcerated in the juvenile justice system. So we're seeing some progress there with that data. So one last slide before I'll turn it over to Michaela, actually 2 more slides. Where are we with ACEs? And you folks, many of you folks know this already, that the 4 most prevalent ACEs events in Kentucky our kids experience are divorce, a relative is incarcerated, substance abuse issues in the family, and economic hardship, okay? And we know that 22% of all Kentucky kids experience at least 2 ACEs events, which ranks Kentucky 14th highest in the nation, okay? So we just gave you a little bit of a snapshot on some data on the health outcomes for kids, the behavioral health, when we look at completed suicides or hospitalizations or emergency room visits for mental health issues. Carly, if you would go to the next one, please. I know I threw a lot of data at you in a very short period of time, but I just want to remind everybody, each of you folks know this already, that each data point we share, it's just not a piece of data, it's a child. And I love the quote from President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that we may not be able to prepare for the future for our children, but we can at least prepare our children for the future, okay? So with that being said, I just want to introduce Michaela from Russell County Public Schools. and Michaela is the mental health specialist there. And I just a quick shout out to Russell County. We've been in partnership with them for about 3 years and helping them create that robust framework of support for kids, and they've done a wonderful job. One of the things that they did in Russell County was to hire Michaela, and that none of this work, the partnership between Bounce and the Russell County Public Schools and the Public Health Department down there couldn't have been done without a grant from the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky. So we also want to do shout out to them. So I'm going to turn it over to Michaela, and she's going to do our case study.
Hi, you all. So I'm joined late because it's the last 4 days of school. It's a good time. We're having a joyful time here, counting down a little bit. The kids are too. It's good. It's a good time. So I think you received the case study in an email. I'm going to give you a heads up also and a slight warning. Pollen has hit my nervous system, and so I squeak a little bit. I could cough every few minutes. I'm eating cough drops like candy. So bear with me a little bit. We're going to make it through it. But okay. So the case study that I sent out is about, I named her Amanda. She's 14 years old. She is a twin. She's been through a lot of trauma. She's actually been through a little bit more trauma than I put on here, but I kind of put kind of the bigger ones that have been more life-changing in her life, and ones that she's talked about more recently. In here, her parents are both addicts and recovering addicts. She was living with her mother and her father whenever the first round of addiction took them away from their parents and out of the home. They've seen mom, for a fact, I know they've seen mom in active drug use. So it's just going to be easier. I'm just going to read it, okay? So she's a 14-year-old female who's experienced trauma since a very young age. They were actually removed from the home while they were in elementary school, early in elementary school. She's currently in the 7th grade, and she's living with her biological dad and stepmom. Her twin sister is also there, and then stepmom has a little girl who is in elementary school. Amanda does not currently have contact with her mother. Mom is very active in addiction again. So the court has kind of cut the visitation for just a little bit to see how mom is going to react and if she can kind of go back through the process of entering sobriety again. So she is not seeing her, but that does not limit Amanda's supports that she has. Her dad is very actively involved. Her stepmother is very actively involved. She has a maternal aunt who actually works here at the school, so she has that support as well as her maternal and paternal grandparents, and some friends, not many friends. So early on, of course, in elementary school, she watched both her parents fight addiction. During this time, they found mom, when they got off the bus one day, they found mom on the stairs of their house, actively overdosing. She explained that she found mom kind of hunched over with a needle in her arm. And grandma was shortly behind the bus to pick them up. They were going to go somewhere to eat and called 911. So soon after this, they were both placed in the custody of their grandparents, both maternal and paternal, because dad was actively in addiction as well. So they lived with them, with the grandparents, up until probably their 4th or 5th grade, probably the end of their 5th grade year, and they went back to their parents. Both parents had completed treatment and had shown that they were going to be able to come back into society and take care of their children without the aid of drug use. So while the second round, while mom was re-entering addiction, the girls were kind of running under the radar. So mom was kind of doing her own thing, and so were the girls. The girls were actually actively using marijuana, and I think the twin was actually just taking whatever pills she could get a hold of at the time. I know that she was actively smoking marijuana as well, while Amanda was just kind of trying to keep it together and hold it together for everybody in the house. Amanda also started dating an 18-year-old male. At the time, he was 17, but he was driving, so he'd just come and pick her up, and they would just go, and mom and dad would have no idea where they were. And he ended up driving her to school sometimes, and later she said that they were kind of living together as well. So later there was another event that occurred. It was actually at a town event. The girls had went with their mothers. Mom had went somewhere else with the boyfriend she had at the time. And Amanda actually was involved in an attempted kidnapping where a male grabbed her by the hair. She's got very long hair. He attempted to grab her by the hair and was dragging her into a vehicle while her twin sister was trying to beat him off to get her out of the vehicle. So this in turn, this year, of course, with COVID, all of our kids have really experienced many forms of ACEs from being trapped and isolated at home. But these twins have come back, and they've struggled coming back into the realm of school and what that means and the structure. And so very early on in the school year, Amanda said many times that she felt responsible for everybody. She felt responsible to take care of her sister, who was battling mental health issues. Her sister at the time was very suicidal, and so she felt like she had to be with her, which caused some separation anxiety when they were apart. They were not in the same classes, so they didn't really get to see each other unless they were switching classes and they saw each other in the hallway. But very, very much separation anxiety. She worried about her constantly. If her sister went home because she couldn't handle this, because her twin sister couldn't handle the school day, Amanda would just break down. We're talking panic attack, uncontrollable crying, tantrums. She punched a locker multiple times one time, threw books across the classroom because she wanted to get suspended so she could go home and be with her sister. So finally her sister was able to detox off of all the drugs that she had ingested and alcohol. And so it wasn't too long after this that her sister was finally getting better, and Amanda started to let that wall down a little bit and show us her mental health issues that she was dealing with. She's been dealing with a lot of suicidal thoughts, depression, lots of anxiety, very worried about mom because they can't talk to her right now. Mom tested positive, I think, at the last court date for fentanyl. She'd been taking fentanyl. And so lots of anxiety with that, lots of outbursts of saying, I could just not have a mom anymore. Nobody's there to take care of her. Nobody's there to watch her and make sure she doesn't overdose. So Amanda still feels like she's very responsible to ensure that her mother stays alive. Because she's just always been, she's been the adult in the situation many times. So we got Amanda hooked up with a counselor. Her and her twin sister are both in counseling currently. Amanda has been hospitalized. She was hospitalized for 72 hours within the last two to 3 months. So she requested to find a therapist that was going to do groups for adolescents. And so we searched and finally found one that was going to do that for adolescents. And we got her and her twin sister signed up for therapy, and that she's actively in therapy. She is talking and working through some of that stuff. However, she continues to have lots of anger outbursts. She continues to manipulate. She will manipulate and will lie straight to your face. She will have a drink in her hand and say, I don't have that in my hand. Just full survival mode all the time. So she actually threatened to beat somebody up at a soccer game here recently, which the parent found out about that, of the kid that was going to be beat up, and went and filed charges at the CDW's office, which is the court designated worker. So now Amanda is also in court for those actions. at this point, we have exhausted almost every option that we have to help her and give her the support that she could need. That is actively trying constantly to figure out better ways to help her, but he is running out of options. And so is the court designated worker. So with all of this going on and all the things that she has experienced in her short 14 years, she's struggling. She's not in class much. Her grades have plummeted. Her attendance is court worthy. She has not been in school very much because she's constantly being taken out of school to be placed so she could see her sister and make sure her sister is okay. Lots of anger, cannot keep friends, has very, very few friends. And the friends that she does have, one day they're friends and the next day they're not, which some would say that's typical middle school. And yes, it is right now, but at the same time, not to this degree at all. So Amanda will come up to the front and she'll talk to me. If I can't get her therapist there, she'll talk to me. And we will, as a school, we will work to help her in any way. The teachers are very in tune with their classes that she is in. They know at the drop of a hat if something has changed and if something is wrong. But that is not good enough for her. She will be fine whenever she leaves me and go back to class and begin to cry uncontrollably again. She has picked fights with many students, saying that they're picking on her, when other students in the class are like, I don't know what you're talking about. They weren't even talking to each other. So yeah, that's Amanda. She's got a lot going on. Yeah. Does anybody got any questions? Like, do you want any more information about Amanda first? There's no way I covered her that well.
Michaela, we do have 10 minutes left in your presentation. So if anyone does have clarifying questions before we go into breakout, please feel free to ask those.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you.
Well, I don't hear any more conversation. And Michaela, thank you. I see the positive comments toward your effort in putting this together. I know it was a lot of work to get this together, but I know it's even more work to help a struggling young lady in her life. So thank you. So that gives us a few more minutes to be in breakout groups or either report out groups. So Carly is going to put us into breakout groups. We have a series of questions. Actually, there are 4 questions. You will be assigned a facilitator that will guide you through these questions. All feedback, any feedback, this is a support system. We all have had experiences, some more than other, with working with youth or adults who have had these issues when they were youth. So feel free to contribute. And Carly, if you are ready to put people into groups, and then we'll spend about 20 to 25 minutes in discussion and then come back out and highlight the high level comments that were made. So here we are, and it's time for us to share what we've learned in our groups. And Carly, I may need to ask you for assistance with this, but why don't we start with every facilitator raising their hand so I know who facilitated. Okay, I'm going to go according to my screen, and then when we get to the point where I don't see someone, Carly, will you help me by jumping in? Kelsey, let's start with you. Tell me how many people were in your group and what your main takeaways were.
Sure. So we had 4 people in our group, and 2 of which this is their first bounce grain round. So they are new to kind of this process and community, but we're really eager to jump in and learn. So a couple takeaways from our group's discussion. I know in terms of what additional information is needed, I think we spent some time talking about the relationship piece and really kind of diving into Amanda's relationships with her grandparents, her aunt, and kind of other support people within her network early on. Another thing we had spent some time around was looking into those therapeutic modalities that are being used in her treatment, because I know that kind of what Amanda was saying was kind of different than some of her classmates' accounts of kind of different behaviors. So just making sure that, those services are being effective. We also, in terms of other possible interventions, continuing to make sure that there's family therapy opportunities and making sure that her father and her stepmother and grandparents are getting those supports as well, and making sure that the family's basic needs are being met. I don't know if that was mentioned, maybe I missed that in the case study, but making sure that kind of the basic needs are being met, and then her parents continue to have access to substance abuse treatment. And then I think as far as the what could have been done differently is making sure, I know that our educators have a lot of eyes and ears on our students, so making sure that the school staff where Amanda and her sister went to can kind of spot early warning signs and kind of make sure that they're providing Amanda support and mental health supports along the way, since I know that she's experienced trauma from a young age. So
Thank you. Anything else, Kelsey?
I think that's it.
Well, those are really good points. And since we have a minute here and we may not be able to see, but I'm wondering if you could introduce the people who were in your group.
Sure. Emily, trying to find her on screen. Emily Beauregard. Do you want to introduce yourself? Oh.
Yeah, hi, Emily Beauregard. I'm the director of Kentucky Voices for Health.
Hi, Emily.
And then Lily.
Hi, I'm Lily from Safe Place. I work as a youth worker, and I work with age ranges from 12 through 17. We work with homeless youth and people who just need mediation with family as well.
Thank you.
Oh, and then me, I guess you'd be. I
Hi,
was the last one.
Clarissa.
Oh, and Clarissa. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I was the last one in the group.
She's the team.
Clarissa, Communications and Social Media at KYA.
Great. Thank you very much. And you brought up some really good points, because if basic needs aren't met, it's very difficult to build forward to belonging and a healthy, satisfied life. Who wants to go next? Jacqueline, I see you.
Hi, yes. So in addition to some of the points that Kelsey shared with regards to treatment, making sure that the family, that Amanda as well as her family have the therapeutic supports they need. We mentioned family therapy to address some of the family dynamics and relationships. We also mentioned peer support services for Amanda. We spoke at length about trying to help identify a skill or a spark or a strength that, that we might help Amanda to develop that skill or passion and give her a positive activity to participate in. Also identifying one positive person who could serve as a mentor or support for Amanda. And then we also spoke as far as additional services. I don't know that we mentioned it in the case study, but a 504 plan or an IEP to address, when kids are in and out change homes or are involved in treatment facilities, sometimes there can be some educational gaps that develop, also some social emotional gaps as well. It was mentioned how there's maybe some, she has some friends, but not many friends, and how some of the kids, there are different viewpoints. They're viewing situations differently. And we wondered about the possibility of reframing some of those, what were described as manipulative behaviors, and really trying to assess what's the need that Amanda's trying to meet. And if we could look at it through that lens, how might that reframe some of maybe the school and how they're looking at some of those behaviors if we're looking at it from that perspective.
Thank you. Those are really good points. Quickly, would you introduce who was in your group?
Sure. We had Dr. David Fink was in our group. And Annie Connor was in our group. She's with SCSC, and Dr. Julia Mitchell was with Smoketown Family Wellness. She may have had to hop off to see a patient. Rosalind Patton-Pelt with CASA, and then Glenna Hess, who's retired from JCPS. We're all in our group.
Thank you. Thank you. Melissa?
All right. Hello, everyone. So I had a group of 3 lovely individuals. So we have Dawn Burke. Dawn, are you still here with us? You can, yeah, there we go. And then Alicia Watley with KYA. And then also Jasmine Newton, if you want to give us a wave, Jasmine. All right. So within our group, we had a great discussion. And so the first little bit that we talked about was that additional information that's needed. And we talked about finding out from the family member what their vision is. So getting all of the family members together and really having a conversation with the grandparents, Amanda, twins, all of the stakeholders in the family, and talking about what their vision is moving forward as a family would be probably really good to do. Also, as others have talked about, what are those underlying and unmet needs? To then kind of help understand what are some of the behavioral outcomes that are happening because of those unmet needs. And then another one that we talked about was really just sitting down and seeing what services are available in Amanda's area to then help us to decide, what are some different routes that we might be able to take that would be best serving for that family. So we talked a lot about a wraparound process, wraparound services that were needed, really good group therapists for the family, but then also that adolescent kind of group that Amanda's in is great. But then looking at parent support groups for the parents as well, because it's really, important that those parents are having the support that they need when it comes to understanding how to care for a child or children who have undergone traumatic experiences. So making sure that the parents have the tools that they need as well. Looking at a trauma assessment, of course, and then if those recommendations would then go to a psychiatrist, what that might look like. Just simply validating Amanda's feelings, right? So that's a great starting point within those therapy groups. And having a strong team of therapists and a strong group working with the family is really important. And then building on a little bit, I think another group may have mentioned this, but having a mentoring program. So the fact that Amanda struggles keeping friends and having kind of those friendship figures in her life, having positive engagement within the community, really. So like whether it's a Big Brothers, Big Sisters program, just really having some sort of positive influence and positive figure in her life might be a really great opportunity for her as well. So I think that's where we landed. So
thank you, Melissa. Mara?
Yes. Hey. So in my group was Amy with Kentucky Voices for Health, Angie from Rockcastle County Schools, Jesse from CTIP, a national group, and then Kim from Metro United Way. And I'm going to build on some of the things that some takeaways that we've already heard. But one question that we had was, I know with the case, we can't give away too many details, but where the family is, I think Melissa kind of alluded to this, that really impacts the services and supports available to them in their area, unemployment rates, job availability for the parents, et cetera. So knowing that kind of gives some good context for us to consider. Another possible intervention that was kind of alluded to, but a little bit more specifically would be the parenting skills training for especially dad and stepmom for best supporting, their girls who've gone through a lot of trauma, who've, are dealing with their own addiction and mental health concerns, and how to, best facilitate that as a parent. And then thinking about ways in which the girls, Amanda, can have better, interactions and positive interactions with peers would be kind of getting involved in those extracurriculars. And thinking about how friskies can help facilitate that in the schools, especially. But, allowing for extracurriculars to have where maybe the twins could do that together if, they really need that time, and, being able to celebrate positive outcomes, positive interactions from those extracurriculars. And then thinking about another approach to it is empowerment. And I think we kind of alluded to this, but empowering Amanda around, what do you want? What would be the most helpful to you? Like really asking her, whether that's the motivational interviewing or however that is achieved, but thinking about how, empowering a young person for their own future, and that can really play a role in better outcomes.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Myra. I do see similar themes as we go along talking, and I think all of this is going to be so valuable for Michaela to see if there are any new ideas. I know that she's thought heavily, but any new ideas? Keith?
Thank you, BJ. So I want to thank the participants in our group. It was Carrie Siff, who's with Pace Connections, Director of Strategic Partnership, Matthew Davis, who's SEL Specialist in London, Kentucky School District there, Moyo Oliami, sorry, Moyo, if I'm messing your name up, I apologize. Kentucky Youth Advocates intern, JQ Sylvester with Bounce Humana, and Michaela, of course, is in our group. Mental health specialist, Russell County, and then myself. In addition to some of the questions that were raised, I think a couple that went a little deeper in our discussion was around leveraging, really exploring the relationship with the uncle, who's the SRO, around safety and safety for the family. I thought that was a very good question raised. As part of a few additional caring adults that could provide that for the family. The relationship with the twin sister came up quite a bit about how do we leverage that relationship in a more positive way? Could it be done through mentoring and other relationships in the community? So they focused on strengthening relationships by looking at the twin aspect for Amanda and how her sister can be a transformative pathway because of the assets that are a part of that relationship that exist. We did ask about the questions raised about the 504 services. And in terms of the community agencies, one in particular that came up, which I completely wholeheartedly advocate for, but is not a strong resource in the community yet, is dialectical-based therapy, DBT therapy, and where the family could strongly benefit from that, and Amanda could as well in terms of the core skill being mindfulness, and any other four complementary skills that go with that, and how that supports a skill set for Amanda in her therapy, one-on-one therapy sessions. So that was a really, really good point raised. And it also, that point, if it's not something that's not fully developed in the community, it could be something where other partners could really provide some resources around that could benefit other families within those neighborhoods. And so that's what we came up with.
Thank you, Keith. Some new ideas, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Tony.
Well, on the challenge of being the last group to present, we'll see what novel things we can talk about.
You're not the last group.
Oh, good. In our group, and maybe you can wave as I mention you, we had Barry, and Tina was with us, and Pat and Angela, and it was a really lively discussion. A couple of things I think that were really stressed in the group that are important. One was we had a big discussion about wanting more information. You know, like Keith, we thought there was real power maybe in the relationship with her sister, but we wanted to know more about that relationship and the history of it. We wanted to know more about her mental health history, you know, diagnostic history. We wanted to know more about her school history. You know, what her grades been like? What have school interventions been like? Has there been testing? So a lot of that kind of background information we would have wanted to know more about ideally. And in terms of supports, there was a lot of discussion in our group about the importance of peers. You know, we know that success for young people experiencing this kind of trauma depends on stable, engaged people around them and in their lives. And so there was a lot of talk about peers, both peers for her and peers for her parents. Are there peer support opportunities for her parents so that they can develop some of what they need to respond to what are complicated lives that they have? You know, is there support for her in terms of peer mentoring through something like Big Sister maybe, or adolescent peer support programs? Barry talked about a really interesting project that they're piloting in Mayfield, which is a structured peer support opportunity during the summer for young people. So we did a lot of talk about the importance of peers and the importance of, can we structure good peer support both around her and also around her parents and the family?
Thank you, Tony. Some really great ideas have come out of that. Joe, do you recall your members? Because I wrote it all down if you did.
Sure. Thank you. And we'll see, Tony, I think we are the last group. Okay.
Yeah.
But
You
we had a
didn't
great
have your
conversation.
hand up though, Joe.
Okay.
Well, Joe knew I knew.
Anyway, but we had a great group. We had Jackie with the Louisville Public Health and Wellness here in Louisville. We had Chloe Atwater with the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky. And we had Jess at U of L in the Trauma Institute, and she kind of focuses on prevention. Just recently joined that organization. So congratulations. And then BJ and myself. And then our last member was Caldwell Beasley, who's a senior this year in high school. And so it was really nice getting that perspective of an actual student. And so it was really valuable hearing what he had to say. So some of the things we talked about, similar to what you've talked about, we talked about, like, say, from a clinical perspective, like, accessing a group of people who have young people had similar situations. And I think Mikhail did talk, I think they were trying to find her a group to young people, doing some group therapy work with them. We also talked a bit more about a lot of the people who are interacting with her are paid people, where, whether it's therapists or teachers. And so we thought about, can we kind of get her in the space where it's not so much of people, professionals who are working with her, but opportunities to be around other young people in a positive situation. So we talked about, can she have some positive experiences with other youth? And we talked a little bit about, like you folks, not only with her sister, but other youth in her community. So for example, like the Girl Scouts, or I think some folks already mentioned, like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, where we have somebody who's in their corner, like say Big Brothers, Big Sisters, who's not paid. They're just there to be, somebody they can go to. That's just for them. And that you don't have to share that with anybody else in the family. We also talked a little bit about advocacy, that she has to maneuver around different organizations, whether it's the school system or the therapy that she's getting, or in the justice system, the juvenile justice system. So having somebody like an advocate for her, and I also think long term, it would be helpful if she can learn those advocacy skills. So those are some things we talked about. And I really liked some of the contributions that Caldwell said, getting, some of those after school activities to help kids. to stay connected and that sense of belonging in school, right? So those are some of the things we talked about in our group.
Thank you, Joe. And I think we've hit all the groups now. I heard theme words come out: empowerment, belonging, connection, and the sentence we use in Bounds frequently, having one adult to believe in a child who is hurting, and the difference that that can make. Michaela, we have a few minutes left, and not trying to put you on the spot, but did you glean anything from this group that would be helpful? The other thing that I thought of is, we know, and it was mentioned into the group that I was listening, part of listening, is not all counties have the same resources. And it may be a good place to start thinking about group advocacy to get necessary resources in all counties. So Michaela, do you have anything you want to add to the discussion?
I will say, of course, we're getting her involved in that adolescent group. During the summer, they're going to provide transportation for her, so it's not hard on the parents and the stepmom to get her there and to get her home. Her twin is also going to be involved in that, and hopefully it will be empowering to her, and that she can make some friends, some people that are, possibly just going through the same thing, and that they can build each other up in the process. The IEP, I will say this, she does not qualify for an IEP or a 504, because she is, she's so intelligent. She is incredibly intelligent, and it's almost like a light switch. So like one day she's completely and utterly fine and she's okay. And then the next she is not. So
an IEP, especially with EBD, there's not an academic requirement. If you're looking at like EBD, I know on the form that's in IC, there's that box about academics, but in the law, there is not that requirement for academics to be impacted. It has to be behaviorally or relationally.
Right. You're exactly right. I say that to say, she knows what that means. And she will play the part to not have to have it. She knows exactly how to answer questions where she won't get it. Because that's kind of where we are. We've tried, it just doesn't pan out.
But she has a diagnosis, right?
She does. We are in the process of assessment to see if she qualifies for a more severe personality diagnosis. We are looking at borderline personality disorder, but she is at such a young age. We do not want to stick that to her until we know absolutely for sure that there's no way around it.
Yeah, I would, let me intervene. I'm going to mention something here, which is that, so for those of you who don't know, personality diagnoses are very rare under the age of 18. And so, and whether fair or not, they're very much a pejorative and condescending diagnosis, and kind of has a really negative impact on receiving services in the future.
Yes.
I would encourage the behavioral health folks to be thinking about the history of trauma as a contributing factor to some of the behavior pieces, and that there are some other diagnoses within the DSM-5 under trauma-related diagnoses that she would probably fit that would not have the same kind of damning future in behavioral health treatment that a personality disorder would have at such a young age.
Right.
So,
but
which is why we're still discussing all of that, which is why it's not been, sorry.
No problem, Michaela, because I think that was really good information, David, to provide, because we don't want to be in a situation where a child ends up being re-traumatized. And I know that wasn't your intention, but sometimes we can do that without meaning to do it. We only have a minute or two left in the wrap up, and then we're going, actually we have a minute. So I am going to say, This has been one of the most informative Bounce Grand rounds we've had. Michaela, you have been a significant piece of that, and thank you for bringing this case forward. A lot of discussion, good discussion. I always say it takes a village, and that's what Bounce Grand Rounds, and I know that is trite to say it, but the work that I have done in the community, I have seen it happen over and over again. So I want to thank Michaela again. I want to thank each and every one of you for what you have done. We have a survey that we would like for all of you to take a minute and put it to answer, because I think what you can see is how informative this is. If you want to present a case, or if there is a particular issue that you want discussion around, fill that out, let us know in the survey, and we can address that. If there is anything that we can do to improve Bounce Grand Rounds, let us know that, because we take it seriously and we try to shift this to meet the community's need, to meet your needs, to be of most help for you. That's why we do this work. So if you can take a minute to do that, we are so thrilled that you attended the 7th Bounce Grand Rounds. We look forward to seeing you and anyone else you want to invite to the 8th Grand Rounds. Well, that will happen in the fall of this year. So it's not much longer, but for some of you, you get a nice refreshing break in between the two, and we are jealous of you. So that we hope you do have a great summer, and thank you for participating today. Again, another time, thank each of our facilitators. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Joe, for being part of the presentation, and thank you, Michaela. So see you soon. Please fill out the survey.